A maid walks into her boss's office and notices that he wasn't paying attention to her. She then sits down at her boss's desk, where there were some banknotes, and with some ribbons that were on her dress, manages to get the bills for herself. At this point, another man enters the room and says it's time for the boss's meeting. The maid then says that she would leave as she went to her boss's office just to clean her up, but the man says that she needed to stay there as she was missing some notes on her desk. He says that neither of the two would leave that room without him knowing what had happened. The employee says he hadn't done anything wrong, and the maid says she hadn't taken the money either. She said that her boss might not have counted the money on her desk properly and that he should have paid more attention to it. He says he hadn't been wrong and wanted to be money, but she said she wouldn't let him search her. He then tells her that she was guilty as she was not cooperating. The employee says that his boss could search him as he had done nothing wrong. The man then said he was going to search his employee, and when he finishes, he realizes that his employee didn't have the money. He then says that apparently, the employee had not taken the money and asks the employee to search the maid. The clerk then says that he would search the maid and does so. She is apprehensive about this, and when the employee finishes, he says that the maid had not taken the money. The boss asks if he was sure about that, and the employee says yes. She then asks her if she could leave, but the man says that neither of the two would leave that room without him getting his money back. He said it was going to be money back, but the clerk says that neither of the two had taken the money from his boss. The boss then says that if they didn't say anything, he would call the police to arrest the two. He said he was going to count to 3, so that someone would confess, and at that moment, some bills fall off the maid's dress. The boss says the employee had told her she hadn't taken the money and that he was disappointed in both of them because of it. He then asks the employee to call the police. The officer then says that he could call a policeman there to learn the maid, but that the policeman would also arrest his boss. The man is surprised by the one who asks what they were talking about, and the maid says that the man should stop pretending not to know what was going on. She then says that she knew about everything that was going on there. The man then becomes enraged by the situation and calls for his security guard. She then tells the man that she had proof that he had been scamming his clients for a long time. He then asks the maid what they knew, and she said she knew he cheated his clients into selling their house and said it was illegal. We are then shown that the man had tried to sell a lady's house. He hands the lady a contract where all she had to do was sign, and she was going to sell the house, but she said she didn't want to sell anymore. He then said that she was being silly for not selling the house as she was going to make a lot of money and still get rid of her old house. She then says that she didn't know that her house was going to sell so quickly, but the man says that her house was very good and that it was now worth much more than the lady had paid for it. He tells her she should sell the house quickly. She then asks him if he was sure of that, and he says yes and asks if she would close the contract with him, and she accepts. The man said that she had made an excellent deal and that he would have a lot of money to hand over to her, as he would keep almost none of what they would get from the house and that she would keep all the rest of the money. She accepts the terms, and then he gets very excited. Sometime later, the lady returns to the man's office and asks if he had finished what he needed to do. He then says that he would soon be able to sell the woman's house and that he just needed her to finish the contract. She said that she was very happy with that and that she had already seen a house on the beach to buy with the money from the sale. He said that she didn't need to worry about that and that she would soon have money to buy her new house. This makes her really happy, and she says that soon she could be in her new home. She then said that she was very grateful for everything the man was doing for her. He says she didn't need to worry about that, as he just wanted to do good for her. She thanks him again, leaves, and when she was leaving, he starts laughing. Sometime later, she comes back to the man saying that he had deceived her. He then tells her that he didn't know what she was talking about and asks her to leave that house, but she said that this was her house and that she would not leave. He then tells her that the house was no longer the woman's and tells her to leave. She asks him what he was talking about, and he says that the contract she had signed gave him the right to keep that house. He then said that if she was smart, she would get out of that house as quickly as possible, or she would be arrested. She then said that she didn't understand what was happening, as he was the one in the wrong. He then says that it wasn't wrong and that she had signed the contract with him without him having to force her, and that now, he had every right to do that. He says he could make her leave without anyone complaining. She then said that he would pay for what he had done to her and leaves. Meanwhile, the woman was watching this, and then she goes to the other man. She said she needed to talk to him about a very important matter and asked if he remembered the nanny they had as a child. He says yes, and that he was already very fond of her, because, despite everything, she was their neighbor. She then said that she had seen the man take advantage of the sale of her house and that it was wrong. She says that the man had sold the woman's house and that he would not give her the money he had received from the sale. He then says he didn't understand what she was saying and asks if he was really going to keep all the money. She says yes, and that the man would not hand over any of the money to the lady. He then says that this was wrong and that they were going to have to do something about it. He said he would call the police on a man and he would be arrested. At this point, he says he had another idea and asks the woman for help. The employee then tells his boss that it was a really bad thing to do to other people and that he should feel ashamed. The maid then asks if she could call the police, but the man tells them to wait as he has a proposal. They then ask what the man's proposal was, and then the man reveals that he wanted the two of them to hand in a letter of resignation, and that he was going to return the house to them. He said that this way, no one needed to know about it anymore, and they accept it. Sometime later, the man hands them the money and says he would keep a share. The security guard then warns the man that he has a meeting. When the man turns around, then he was no longer paying attention to the money. The employee takes the money that belonged to the man and hides it inside a briefcase. The man Tom talks to them again and says that it had been a pleasure to do business with them. The employee then shakes hands with the man and walks away with the money. When they leave, the man tells him for his safety that he could leave as he was going to settle some matters. He then sits down in his chair and opens the briefcase, but at that moment he realizes that there was nothing in the briefcase. He then becomes furious, unsure of where his money might be. Sometime later, the clerk and the maid were together with the lady. They then tell her that they had a surprise for her and reveal that they had bought the house. She is surprised to hear that her house had been bought by them, and the woman says that they got the money to buy the house again for her grandmother. The man says they were very happy to have been able to buy his grandmother's house for her. The lady said she was very happy for what they were, the best grandchildren anyone could have. The woman then says that she was happy that she was able to buy the house back for her grandmother and that they knew that this house meant a lot to their grandmother. The lady hugs her grandchildren and tells them that she loved them very much.